What is a newton? A newton is a unit of measure that measures force, kind of like how a foot is a unit of measure that measures distance, or a second is a unit of measure that measures time, or even miles per hour is a unit of measure that measures speed or velocity. Well, a newton is a unit of measure that measures force, and 1 newton equals 1 kilogram meter per second squared. What do I mean by that? Well, let's look back at the miles per hour example. Miles per hour measures speed, but this unit is made up of 2 other units. It has miles and it has hours, so it's miles per hour. Miles measures distance and hours measures time. So miles per hour measures distance per time. And then the reason why I'm using miles per hour as an example is because miles per hour is an example of something called a compound unit, which is basically like a compound word where you have 2 words where each word has its own meaning, but when you put them together, it forms an even bigger word. Well, that's basically what compound units are. There are multiple units that when you put them together, it forms another unit. So miles per hour is a compound unit. So looking back at this, 1 kilogram meter per second squared is also a compound unit, except it's just a little bit more complex. It's also worth noting that 1 newton, being 1 kilogram meter per second squared, is made up entirely of what's called SI units. If you don't know what SI units are, you can click on link number 1 in the description. SI units are basically just a subcategory of metric units, but if you want an explanation, you can click on link number 1. It's also worth noting that 1 newton is about 1/4 of a pound. So kilogram meters per second squared is also a compound unit. It's just a little bit complex. And this is mainly because it is a compound unit with a compound unit inside of it. So miles per hour is distance per time. So the equation, the formula for speed is distance divided by time, miles divided by hours. So like 30 miles per hour is 30 miles of distance per 1 hour of time. So the definition, the equation for speed or velocity is distance divided by time, or something like kilometers per hour or meters per second, or inches per millisecond. It can literally be anything that is some type of length divided by some type of time. So when it comes to forces, which is what a newton measures, the definition or equation of a force is mass times acceleration. So kilograms is the unit that measures mass, and then meters per second squared is the unit that measures acceleration. So then let's take a closer look at meters per second squared measuring acceleration. Well, what is acceleration? Acceleration is basically just an increase in speed or velocity. So if speed is kilometers per hour or meters per second, that's like saying you're traveling 3 meters every second, or 6 meters in 2 seconds, or 9 meters in 3 seconds, or so on. You're basically marking how much distance you're traveling per unit of time. Well, the acceleration is an increase in speed. So basically, when you are looking at speed, the speed is getting faster and faster. So an example of a speed would be like 3 meters per second. Then the acceleration would be how much faster is that speed going. So the speed would be like 3 meters per second. Then the acceleration would be like 3 meters per second per second. So speed is distance per time, and acceleration is distance per time per time. And then so if you have something like 9 times 9, you would say, oh, that's 9 squared, or a times a equals a squared. Well, a second times a second is a second squared. So a meter per second is basically just the same thing as saying meters per second squared. And that is why a meter per second squared is an acceleration. So we know that 1 newton is a unit that measures force, and the definition or the equation of a force is a mass times an acceleration. The kilogram is the unit that measures mass, and then meters per second squared is the unit that measures acceleration. So you have mass times an acceleration. And then all I'm going to do after this is I'm going to rewrite it. I'm just going to rewrite it so that kilograms is in the numerator, which is the top, and then meters per second squared. The meter is also going to be in the numerator, which is up top, and then the per divided by second squared is going to be at the bottom, so that it reads kilogram meters per second squared. So a force, which is what a Newton measures, is a mass, kilogram, times an acceleration, meters per second squared. And that is why 1 Newton equals 1 kilogram meter per second squared.